Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar today. I'm Marta Halbeck, and I'll be the chair of the webinar. Before I'm going to hand over to the speaker after introducing him, just a few housekeeping information. So when you have any questions during the webinar, you will not be able to ask them using your microphone, but you can type them in the questions pane. So if you take a look at the different panels, there's one with the heading questions. If you type it there, then at the end of the webinar, I will give the questions to the presenter and he'll get the opportunity to also answer your questions. Also with the slides of the webinar, they are available for you to download. So if you click on the handouts pane, you'll see that there is a PDF file for you to download. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome you to this webinar where the title is Introducing Immersive Articles and How to Write Them, and to our wonderful speaker today, which is Professor Alexander Dockhorn. So Alexander Dockhorn is a junior professor for computer science at the Institute for Information Processing of the Leibniz University Hannover. His research is focused on the topics of machine learning, decision-making, AI in games, and game development. He is an active member of IEEE and serves as the chair of the IEEE Computational Intelligence Society Games Technical Committee and the Summer School Subcommittee. Previously, he has been the chair of the IEEE SIS Competition Subcommittee and organized the Hearthstone AI competition, as well as several other competitions. Motivated by the idea to explain AI to a broader audience, he's been proposing and driving forward the integration of interactive articles at the IEEE Computational Intelligence Society. And with that, it's my pleasure to hand it over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much for this kind announcement. I welcome everyone to this talk of mine today on introducing immersive articles and how to write them. And if you have any questions, you can definitely post them today during the session. But if we are running out of time, then you also have my email address here. So please feel free to contact me anytime. I'm really looking forward to introduce you to this new technique at IEEE. I'm currently working at the Leibniz University Hannover, and I am coming there from previously the University of London, where I had the opportunity to speak to Simon Lucas, who helped me bringing all of this together into the IEEE. And since then, we are actively working on introducing these interactive articles as a new type of publication, which I want to show you today about how to produce them and what they are for. So without further ado, let's just get into what is an immersive article and why should you care? Immersive articles is basically a new transformation of how we could use technology to communicate. And if we are looking in the past, then communication is always impacted a lot by the technology that we have available. It started by speaking, we have drawings and writings, and with the introduction of technology like smartphones, communication has gone much beyond that. We are communicating on a faster pace, in a more interactive manner. We included videos like in this transmission right now. And if we are looking at the papers that we publish, we don't see too much changes over the years. So for example, if I'm still looking at papers from 100 years ago, they look pretty similar. The technology and how we produce them has changed. We are using new tools like Microsoft Word or LaTeX, which have been unthought of before. But the basic concept of what a paper is supposed to do and how we create it or what it contains hasn't changed. And with this new initiative, we want to get onto another level to include new materials which benefit us in producing higher quality papers and increasing the interaction between the readers and the authors. So what is an immersive article? Basically, I already mentioned that the publications that we produce haven't changed in ages. But on the contrary, if we are looking at web pages, on newspapers, on blogs, all of them started enriching their content. They now include interactive materials like things that you can click on to see interactive graphics, for example. They include audio material, they include videos, and we can include all of those as supplementary materials in our works, but we don't really have a connection in our articles. With immersive articles, we basically have a new type of publication being introduced that aims to transform scientific publication by directly including those materials in the article itself. And this has some drastic impact on what our article can deliver. But we have some things that we need to be aware of when making this new opportunity. First of all, we need to simplify the development of such interactive content. While many of us will be aware how these technologies might work, which are based on the web stack, some of us might not. And therefore, we want to create a tool that is easy enough to be used by anyone who can currently produce papers in, for example, LaTeX. Furthermore, we want to ensure that the articles we produce have long-term accessibility. IEEE has a high standard of making articles available for a very long time. And for a PDF document, this is rather simple because, for example, you could just print it, put it into your desk, and then it will survive as long as the paper holds. But for interactive elements, the technology that we are using to look at such interactive elements might change. So, for example, the browser is developing further and some tools get outdated. So we need tools to make these accessible in the future. And last but not least, well, a PDF is a very standard format. We have just different paper sizes that we need to take care of. For a presentation in a web browser, for example, we have many different devices that need to be supported. And all of these aspects will be covered in the immersive article framework. Now, I've already talked a bit of what should be included and what we think of should make an ideal immersive or interactive article, but it's best to look at one example. So let me quickly share of what an interactive article looks like. This is it might take a while until the screen changes. I hope it's not too much of a delay in between, but this is an overview of IEEE Xplore and the first immersive article that we included. It's basically our proposition of how this technique could be included, and it's our first draft of these implementations. So first of all, it looks like a very common article overview. We have the title, we have the abstract, and everything is citable, like with a digital object identifier. Everything is normal. The only thing that has changed is that we have this additional button showing immersive article. And clicking on this opens up a new format that hasn't been used before. If you are aware of internet pages like Distill, then you have already seen what an interactive article could look like. And this is basically our implementation of the same framework. We have the typical text content that is shown, giving us an overview of the different content and what the article is about. And if I scroll down a little, I have these interactive blocks, which are highlighted by a blue rectangle surrounding the actual interactive content. And in contrast to a written paper, we can now interact with the content that is being shown. For example, in this work here, we have an article on how to solve the 8 queens problem as an example of how we can implement evolutionary algorithms and the different components to include there. And as a very basic example, we ask our readers to solve the problem themselves to get a better understanding how complex it is and how it could be solved in the future. Now, while this is a toy example, if I scroll down a little, I have more meaningful representations like this one at the bottom. It basically shows us different representation and encodings of how a solution candidate in an evolutionary algorithm can be encoded. And here we have, for example, a permutation vector, a row vector, and column vector. And not all of those might be valid solutions. And therefore, we can explore the different search spaces. Further down below, we have mutation and crossover operators, all directly interactable for the users to experiment themselves with the actual content of the paper to get a better understanding. And that's already an advantage that is to be highlighted by such interactive or immersive content. So getting back to my slides, here are some of the important aspects of creating immersive articles. First of all, it's a technique for connecting people and the data itself. While we are presenting our work, we have some data that we want to communicate. And given these interactive components, we allow people to interact with the data itself, which hopefully engages them a lot more. This also makes up for a playful interaction with the content itself. So for example, if you have a system that is proposing a way of simulating a process, then you can just run the simulation directly with the user and they can observe how the interaction emerges over time. So we also don't require our readers to do a specific setup because the whole simulation is included in the article itself, and therefore it's a much easier time of processing the information that is shown in the paper. Furthermore, we can prompt readers for self-reflection. So for example, we can have little tests included or quizzes, which ask them specific questions. And if they didn't understand some concept, you can refer them back to a section that should be read in more detail. Or for example, you can give them specific background text, which otherwise can be skipped if they are already aware of things. This is also a concept of personalizing the reading experience. So we can let readers choose the content that is relevant to their own experience. For example, there has been an online article about different voting schemes in countries, and then you can show them the voting scheme of their own country and see how different voting schemes would have impacted the result. This makes a more personalized experience than with just providing a general example, and therefore readers are much more engaged and have a much better retention of the content itself. Finally, we can reduce the cognitive load of the readers by using more effective representations in which we can focus on different aspects. For example, in a paper, we would be limited in the amount of figures that we can include without reaching the page limit. With such an interactive content, we can just put multiple pictures side by side and let the users select which of them is shown in detail, and then they can proceed with the remainder. All of these aspects have been summarized in a great article in the Distill journal about how to communicate with interactive articles. And I can warmheartedly recommend this article as another introduction of what interactive articles can provide you and your readers in your communication between each other. Finally, to summarize advantages and disadvantages of interactive articles, we have an improved understanding of the readers that read the content of your paper because they are much more engaged, and this results in a better retention of the content that you are trying to share. Finally, we have some more versatility and presentation, which makes us more flexible in how we want to present our content. And we will see examples of this later on. For the disadvantages, we have a higher complexity in development. In contrast to just writing or just to provide a static image, we need to have much more engagement options, and therefore we have more development upon us. With the framework that we provide, we want to make this development process as easy as possible. And today we are showing how little it deviates from writing an actual LaTeX paper. Furthermore, we want to support multiple devices, and that's also something that the template can take care of. A last thing that isn't to be played down, but it's a new challenge here in the interactive format, is that we have accessibility constraints. For example, if you have somebody that is deaf, then having included audio content might not be as approachable as describing what the audio contains in a text format. So just including new media doesn't mean that the paper becomes more accessible. Sometimes we include special challenges by including new media types, which need to be taken care of very carefully. So those are things that include new responsibilities, but also new chances that we have with such interactive articles. And now we best look at which types of content we can include to make more valuable paper in our article itself. And to say what content can be included is much harder than to say what cannot be included, because the other list is much smaller. So for example, we have set up a few constraints just to ensure that the content will be accessible in the future and that we will have a consistent representation over time. And one of those is that the content presented in the paper needs to be fully self-contained. So we have no external references to sources that are not provided on IEEE servers, because we cannot ensure that those sources will stay up later on. So for example, you cannot connect to an external data set, you cannot connect to an external library, but you can just include those in your article itself and then let users explore and engage with the content that is completely included in the article. Furthermore, everything that will be computed needs to run solely on the user's web browser. So there are no server connections because, once again, we cannot ensure that a connection to an external server will be persistent over time. All these have been implemented to achieve the goals of consistency and minimizing dependencies, but also to protect our users' data. Apart from that, there are no limitations of what can be included in such an article, except for that it still needs to be relevant for the article. And these directions may change in the future with future versions of the template. But now let's have a look of how you could extend what your article is already providing. So for example, a very simple one for everyone that is already aware of what typical websites include, we can directly include animations and videos. I've prepared this example from an article here in which they basically argued that a very old paper, they have debated if horses ever completely lift all four legs in while running. And if we include a video, we can directly show every frame by frame if this is happening or not. Similarly, if you have a physical process that you simulate, or you have a 3D visualization, you can just make use of an actual video that you're presenting of the tools that you have been implemented or the experiment that you included. This is definitely something that wouldn't have been possible with a standard article. And then you can also directly refer to it in the article and pinpoint to specific frames by letting the article jump to the specific part of the screen. Another aspect is that you could include audio processing examples. So if you have a tool that is processing a sound or that is trying to remove vocals, for example, then you can just let the readers listen to your examples. Previously, you could just have the chance of describing that it works better or worse, or you can try to define an objective measure or include a user study in your article. Now you can include the readers as part of your user study by letting them experience the difference yourself. Sadly, I can't give you this example here in the slides since my slide audio is not transported via the GoToMeeting. But since the paper is online, or since the slides are online, feel free to listen at these examples later on. Now, another thing is that you can let the readers directly engage with the data that is contained in your dataset. We all have heard about typical data sets like the IRIS data set, in which just a few data points are included. But with the data that we are working with right now as computer scientists or as engineers, we have just much more to process at the same time. Giving a sophisticated overview is already part of our application process, but sometimes you want to give access to the whole data set and might engage the users by letting them explore it yourself. Here I have two examples. One of them is from a colleague of mine, Cameron Brown, who is working on the Ludi portal, which is talking about different game styles and games that have emerged over different regions of Earth. And as an interested reader, I might now be interested in what a specific category is, how it distributes over Earth. So for example, I can select a game category like racing games and then see that many of these racing games have been implemented in Europe and others also in India, for example, or a lot of them in southern United States. While we see less examples of racing games in, for example, South America. This is a tool that lets us directly engage with the content and test our own hypothesis while reading the text. So for example, at the same time, when you're presenting an algorithm, you might give the users the chance to select their own data set and test a specific hypothesis to check if they understood the material that you are providing. Another element is this very complex presentation here, which is a sunburst plot, in which we show the user interaction of how a website has been traversed over time. So for example, many of the users have visited the home page when others have directly visited a product page at first, for example, by a quick search beforehand, which directly gave them a subpage of your content. And then you can let them interact with it and see how many of them just studied different products, how many of them use the search function of your tool, and give them a chance of getting a better understanding of your data set. Now, those are two examples of static data that you already present, but another interesting element would be to include live simulations. So a simulation that we use for different processes, for example, or just to show how an algorithm works over time, could be included such that users can directly engage with what you are proposing. Here's an example of a study in a newspaper article which tried to summarize how the effect of vaccination affects the distribution of COVID. So for example, you could select the room size and modify it. You can select the amount of time that people are in a specific room or the number of vaccinated people included in your scenario, and then see how it impacts your outcome. So users themselves become part of the research that you are proposing. You can make this a very guided experience by showing them pre-collected examples that you want to highlight, but you can also let them roam free and check their own hypothesis once again. This is a huge enrichment for different models and contents that we want to show. Now, a much more advanced example is given by the example of 3 blues, 1 brown, which shows a visualization of quaternions. While once again, you won't be able to listen what the audio is showing here, I quickly show the example and show what it's including like. So here we have a guided video which shows us how quaternions work. And in this video, we can pause at any time and directly change the parameters here to see what the different aspects would impact, or how the different parameters impact our quaternion representation. The video itself gives us one example, and we can change this example at any time. The video also asks us to explore ourselves how this works. So this is a very advanced interaction of how it could be included. And to my personal experience, it gave me the first good example of how quaternions actually work. So that's a presentation that I can warmly recommend to check out in the future. Here is my final example of what could be included, but all of this is just giving you a first impression of what an interactive article might look like and how your papers may benefit from this. So in this example, we basically have a clustering algorithm. Here, very simply, it's just an implementation of k-means showing a subset of the iris dataset. And in this example, we can just modify the data ourselves. So for example, if you have proposed a new clustering algorithm, you can allow users to import their own data and just show the results of your clustering algorithm on their data set. This hugely benefits the reader because they can start to judge if the algorithm is beneficial to their own work by an actual click of a button. So having an import of external data sets, or for example, for a classification of images, you just import your own image to check if it is able to identify a specific image object class. Then you have a much more engaged user experience, and they will have a much better understanding of what your algorithm is capable of. So here in this example, I can just change the different variables, I can exclude them, or I can include new variables in this, and then I can run the experiment and download the result. Including something like this might be a specific option in future papers of yours. So given all these examples, the question remains is, how can I actually produce an immersive article? And that's where IEEE CIS comes into play, because we have implemented an actual template and gave you author instructions for how to produce such an article. So if you want to try it yourself, we got you covered. The template itself is very similar to the basic LaTeX templates that you will always be aware of. So it includes a minimal version of an immersive article and step-by-step shows you every component. It shows you how to include equations, tables, and interactive materials. It shows you how to structure your text, how to include the author's information and the references. From top to bottom, it's one completed example of what a paper could look like. The author instructions, on the other hand, provide you more detailed examples of how the different elements that the template produces are to be used. So if you get stuck at any point, then the author instructions may be offering additional examples that help you a lot in producing such an article. Then having these descriptions, the question is, how can I produce it if I'm not using, for example, Text Studio or Microsoft Word? Basically, immersive articles are based on a web stack. They are HTML documents which are enriched by JavaScript or WebGL components. So the interaction comes by any of these two languages. And with any text or web editor, you will be able to produce your basic document. One example that I have been using before is WebStorm, a specific editor made for web development. It comes with a free educational license for students and teachers, so this might be an option. Another good choice is Visual Studio Code, for example, because it gives you a lot of flexibility in how you want to customize your environment to this specific purpose. For the example of WebStorm, we have one of these screens shown here, and it gives you a project overview on the left. In the middle, it shows you a file editor. And what I really like about this tool, what Visual Studio Code could do as well, it gives you a preview of your content. So on the right, we have a basic implementation of a web browser in which you can directly engage with the content that you have produced. Because usually it doesn't suffice to just open the index.html file, which is the main entry point of your article, because many of these files need to be hosted on a local server to work. And WebStorm or Visual Studio Code automate this process. So here you just click on Show me a preview, and then it shows you an internal preview in the included browser. But you can also show a preview in external browsers of your choice, like Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and so on. And in these tools, then you basically have text processing. So we have many different commands that we are using on an everyday basis, going from LaTeX to immersive articles. We now present you a very direct translation from some of these commands. And this is more or less just an example of that we wanted to keep the development of immersive articles as simple as possible by transitioning from LaTeX to this web stack. So on the left, you see examples of LaTeX, and on the right, you see the same idioms in immersive articles. For example, if you just provide the title, in LaTeX, it would have been \title and then the name of your article. In an immersive article, the web stack is using the heading 1, so H1 in text, and you have an opening and a closing tag. Very similar. Similar to this, you also have subtitles. You can provide author information and table of contents. And all of these language idioms have an representation in immersive articles as well. So translating your article is really just copy and paste everything over and exchanging these keywords. Now, except for text and the basic text structure, like the different headlines that we include, we also have equations. Luckily, implementations of MathJax allow us to directly embed LaTeX equations into the web stack as well. So we can just include these equations that we have written in the LaTeX paper in the immersive article. The same holds true for figures. We just have a different way of loading a figure from memory. And for table, the way in which a table is structured looks a bit different, but overall, it's also just providing cell by cell the different contents of your table. Definitely something like styling your tables or styling your figures might diverge a bit, but all of this is just based on very simple idioms of CSS. So you can centerize or you can left align and right align any of these columns by modifying a specific cell entry. And there are a lot of helpful tools which make these examples, but also in the template that we provide, we have such examples already included. Now, the most interesting part definitely will be how to include immersive content. And I've already shown an example of how this may look like in your paper. We have this blue rectangle surrounding the content. We have an identifier that highlights that this is an interactive part and a basic introduction of how the interaction will play out. And we have this caption included. The same is just a translation from the different parts that we provide to produce exactly the same result. Much of this will stay consistent over many of these articles because the frame and the interaction identifier will just be the same. So the only thing that you will definitely need to change is the things that are presented, like the description of your interaction that you envision and the things that are shown on the screen. Now, last but not least, you need to provide a script of how the interaction actually plays out. So at the bottom of your class, there will be a line showing a JavaScript element, which then shows you how the interaction plays out. And this is basically a coding task. So that's nothing that we can implement a template for. But the good news is that many of the things that we already do on a daily basis are based on things that we programmed. And then translating these things to JavaScript, for example, or loading them from an external script into a JavaScript language may just be a copy and paste task with some slight adjustment on how the content is being presented. So this will hopefully be rather natural to you. Then the good news is in all these implementations, we have a lot of common tasks that can be simplified by many of these libraries. We also have some things like this in LaTeX, which help us to style tables, for example, or help us to produce our reference list. With interactive articles, we have the same for visualization and, for example, machine learning tasks. So there are a lot of libraries which focus on different aspects of visualization. For example, there is Three.js, which is a very low-level tool with high-performance 3D rendering. We have D3.js, which provides us the capability of loading CSV documents and gives us a very data-driven style of visualization made of composable building blocks, which each of them is interactable in itself. And we also have, on the other level, very high-level languages in which we just import our data and define the different plots that we want to produce, like a bar chart or a scatter plot. And then we can use tools like Sigma.js or Chart.js and just provide a basic image which is interactable and gives us some extra tooltips. Furthermore, we have tools like TensorFlow.js in the machine learning domain, which allows us to deploy pre-trained models. So even if we are not capable of training the whole model in the browser for our users, we can just export the model that we have used in our study and then deploy it to the browser such that it can be run by our users. If we want to go a bit further, we have even some tools which allow us to do machine learning tasks directly in the browser itself. So there are more efficient implementations of, for example, decision tree learning or simple neural networks included in, for example, the library ML5.js, which allows us to load content of our users and to implement algorithms, which then modifies and processes the information uploaded by the user and gives us the result that our algorithm is supposed to do. So libraries can be of great help, but it is too much to tell you about each of these libraries. So depending on the task that you envision, I can just recommend to check out the one that matches your level of detail that you need, and then you can make use of those in the future. Finally, there will be the task of hosting the article to see if everything works. While the local hosted version helps you during the authoring process and the writing process to check if everything works on your machine, you also might want to share your article beforehand with other colleagues of yours. GitHub Pages is a tool that I have been using before, which allows you to host a version of your article in a Git repository. So you just have any Git repository, you activate that the Git repository will also be hosted as a web page. And then every time you push a new version to this repository, the web page will update after 1 or 2 minutes. The link then can be shared with anyone to get feedback from your community or to host a copy of your preprint. Because Archive, for example, does not provide us the capabilities of hosting interactive articles yet. But I have done so myself, and at the beginning, I've shown you an example of the immersive article on the IEEE webpage, and also the version of the self-hosted GitHub repository. Feel free to check it out, and while it is not including the same styling, it gives you the same impression of what the article is supposed to offer, and then it is a great tool of getting feedback by your community or just sharing it with others. Now, one of the things that will be in your mind, if I go through all the process of writing an article, where can I submit it? And definitely we thought about this as well. And I'm very happy to announce that the IEEE Computation Intelligence magazine now also allows for the submission of such immersive articles using these templates. They will also support you in any questions with this process. And I have been involved in the reviewing process as well to check out if the different interaction components can be further improved and help the authors in doing so. Furthermore, we have a special issue on the way, which is called Artificial Intelligence Explained, focusing on using these interactive measures to introduce artificial intelligence methods to the general public. So we want to have very introductory articles which make use of this interaction as a tool of education. The submission deadline is already rather soon. It's in the end of March, and it's referring to the template files and author instructions that I mentioned before. And in this special issue, we also have a more detailed call for papers that I want to guide you to. And we basically want to use these interactive articles, for example, as a tool for letting users adapt your parameters, building their own models from several building blocks to check how the actual algorithm works and how to combine different algorithms, or to interactively analyze a data set or a learned model to learn more about this process. And as a general note, if you're viewing a recording of this webinar in the future, then the deadline may have already passed, but the Computational Intelligence magazine is still including such interactive articles in the future. So as a part of submission instructions, the interactive article is always including a 2-page extended abstract, which is serving as the main entry point of your references later on, and also gives us the opportunity of including a written version of your article in the magazine itself. So there will still be a printed part, which just summarizes the content of your immersive article. And then the immersive article goes onto the web page, which is referred to by the extended abstract. The submission process changes a little bit because it involves much more different files. So we have a compressed zip file containing all the necessary components that you want to provide with your immersive article, definitely including the basic HTML page, but also your custom style sheets and your JavaScript and media files that you want to use. And the submission tool of Scholar One manuscripts allows you to add these as supplementary content, which then undergoes a detailed review process, which recommends you how the interaction could be improved, which bugs may still exist, and how they can be overcome. So all of this was a very broad overview of what immersive articles actually are and how you can start writing them. Now, I want to include myself some notes of appreciation to all the people that have been involved in this process. So it has been 2 years since I approached my former group leader, Simon Lucas, with the idea to integrate immersive articles in IEEE publications. And since then, many researchers, colleagues, and IEEE CIS members have been involved in the development, implementation, and integration of immersive articles. Without their help, this would have not been possible. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to test out this new publication scheme and advance on what papers might look like in the future. So last but not least, it is my time to now ask you about any open questions that I can provide you already. And even if you don't want to post them now, you can contact me anytime via email or using my web address. And I will be happy to help you in your exploration of these new interactive content that you can produce yourself. So as highlighted at the beginning, Made will now also give us the opportunity of answering different questions. And if there are any, I'm happy to help.
Great, thank you so much, Alex. There's already a few that came through. So the first one is, would you mind telling me the motto behind publishing an article in the IEEE CIS, I assume the IEEE CIS magazine?
The what? I just didn't get this word.
Oh, okay. So would you mind telling me the motto behind publishing an article on IEEE CIS?
So basically, the idea that spawned all of this was to have additional educational material. So all of us are already producing high quality lectures, for example, or just tutorials of how different things may work. And those are currently provided on the basis of blog entries or just our private pages in which we explain different algorithms. Now, this is rather disconnected, and it also does not allow us to get credit for it in terms of, for example, citations. So we want to include those as a new opportunity in IEEE CIS publications. And we are very open for the different content that you want to show. So for example, in Computation Intelligence Magazine, which is a very broad magazine itself, you can submit articles on anything related to computational intelligence. If you feel like your article is enriched by further interactive components, then no matter what your article is about, as long as it fits the Computational Intelligence magazine, then it can also be submitted there.
Right, thank you. They're also asking which one should the immersive article be more focused on to introduce the concepts rigorously and accurately, or explain the idea to be easily understood, even if it is less rigorous.
I mean, that's probably something what personal style is chosen from, and the review process can give you feedback if you are satisfying your goals. In terms of the special issue that we are more looking at transporting the idea. So it should be an educational tool of better understanding how artificial intelligence is working. So in this case, it would more be the clarity of information that you provide and not the amount of detail that you could fit into. But for other publications that go into the main track of Computation Intelligence Magazine, it can really just be an addition of your paper in terms of what you want to focus on. So if you feel like a specific detail is not clear given a static image, then you can provide a video or additional content and directly embed it in your article. And then it serves a whole different purpose, but still fits the Computation Intelligence magazine. It would just not be suitable for the special issue that we are proposing, which is just focusing on the clarity and educational nature of the article.
Right, thank you. This other question, I guess you already answered. So they wanted to know who will be the primary readers of the immersive articles. Will it be experts or non-experts? So like what you said, if I understood correctly, for the special issue, it will be non-experts. But then
Yes,
as you explained, if it's an add-on, it could be for an expert and then to explain something better that you cannot do through a static image. Is that correct?
right. That's the basic idea. So for the special issue, we thought we would like to broaden up the whole publications that we produce to make them more approachable to non-experts. They can also be later used as a tool for teaching. So for example, the paper that I've shown on evolutionary algorithms, I have included myself in a lecture, and it is basically based on exercise classes that we had before and the experience we gained from them in a very condensed in a very condensed article that we provide. But later on, we already asked different transaction journals if they would like to include it as well. And moving into these areas, it will just become more relevant to communicate to experts.
Right, thanks. There is currently considerable commercial value for developing interactive material, certainly for publishers, but also, for example, many universities and corporates. How would your approach relate, particularly for authors who are going to effectively transform into developers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a part of open communication that we allow. There's definitely some monetary interest behind this for different sides of this aspect. So as a publisher in IEEE, we have additional value by providing this opportunity. But also as an author, you can either go the way of making this directly into money, for example, of giving high quality publications. But some of us, based on the research part, we just want to focus that the materials that we develop are clear to understand. And then you might just include a few interactive examples while keeping the actual developments closed source. And then you can still make money by other sources of it. But you have a better way of communicating what your algorithm is about. In terms of education, I feel like with, for example, COVID, we had much more opportunities of making teaching international because many of us have now recorded lectures. We have already digital lecture formats that we make use, and this makes it easier for universities to share these materials. Now it's the time that publication venues and publishers open up to similar concepts such that this information can also be shared for them.
Right, thank you. Next question is, are there any tools for interactive data collection through a questionnaire?
The problem would be that it's often relying on an external server connection. So you need to write the results of this questionnaire somewhere. And currently, this would violate our user data protection scheme, so we have blocked for it. But it might be to be implemented in the future that we have a tool by IEEE which can then gather all the user interactions and then only allow the authors to access this information in an anonymized way. But currently, it's not implemented yet.
Okay. Kindly reiterate the use of libraries mentioned on slide 21 with the information given about the use of external libraries on slide 8. I'm a bit confused whether the libraries mentioned on slide 21 are considered as external libraries or not.
Yeah, so the main differentiation would be how you load the library. Many of these libraries, like D3.js, can be completely downloaded and then be provided as a local library for the article. This would be allowed, but referencing an external URL and loading the library through the browser would not be allowed. So this would be an external source, and the internal source would be using the local sources provided with the article. And the latter is important because all these libraries change in a very fast nature. So just referencing the latest external source would mean that if the external source updates, your article might break. Downloading one of these versions and including this with your article will ensure that the library that is downloaded by the user's browser directly matches the one that you provide with your article. So that's the limitation that we included. And you can make use of external source libraries as long as you can completely download them and include them in your article itself. I can't hear you anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The mute button, forgot to unmute.
Yeah.
So the next question is, thank you for your presentation. I have a simple question. Could I share the Immersive article website even after it has been published? Isn't that against copyright?
It would be according to the preprint rules. So during the review process, your article might undergo some changes. All of these changes should only be included in the final article and not in your preprint version that you host yourself. So you need to take care that the article on the public web page that you host is just a preprint of your article that will be accepted by IEEE.
Great, thanks. Then there's a comment for thank you for introducing a new paradigm of writing articles. And then someone said, I'm interested in submitting a paper to the special issue. What would be the
Mhm.
criteria for reviewing?
It's more specified in the call for paper submissions. So um, checking there, it will tell you that the educational value of an article and the clarity of explanation for a given topic will be the main evaluation criteria. And you can choose any CI topic that you would like to focus on. So examples include neural networks, fuzzy systems, evolutionary algorithms, and then choose any of these subtopics that fits those general schemes. If you have any question, if your specific idea matches, please just contact us as the editors for this special issue, and we will provide you some additional feedback on this.
Right, thanks. Can an immersive article include videos further explaining the content?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. What do you see as the barriers or opportunities for immersive content in IEEE transactions?
I mean, we will explore the barriers. Currently, we have a lot of interest of what we can achieve with these immersive content, but we will monitor it in the future and we would also like to gather the feedback from the authors themselves, because with all the templates that we provide, we wanted to make sure that it's simple, but at the same time, we might have not come into issues that other authors are experiencing. So your feedback will be very helpful in transforming this process in the future. And I currently cannot judge what the limitations will be. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Then there are some questions around, will IEEE transactions on fuzzy systems and also other societies accept immersive articles?
That's currently debated, and it's up to the editors in chief and the vice chairs of publication. So we will first look at how CIM, so the Computation Intelligence Magazine, performs with these articles, and then later on advance it to other transactions. But we have already debated some of these chances. I cannot predict.
Yeah. Then what is the fundamental difference between this interactive paper proposal and all the previous similar attempts, for example, in the SIGGRAPH context?
Yeah. So in terms of the highlighted differences is that it's a reviewed publication venue. So for IEEE, it provides a rigorous review process, even for the interactive content, and that it's credible. So for example, in terms of citations and references, since we make sure that the paper stays consistent over a prolonged time, it's not like referencing a website that can be changed anytime in the future or just be offline. It's a definite source of information that we will make sure will stay online and will hopefully be of the highest quality standards that we can impose. And
Okay,
since
thank
it
you.
has a digital object identifier, the reference process is similar to all written papers that you're already knowing.
Yeah. Then there's a final question. Could further developments consider a GUI-oriented approach instead of the templates?
Yes, but currently there was not much. Yeah, so let me begin differently. Um, for now, it has been started as an experiment. We wanted to advance on these capabilities and we wanted to make it as simple as possible given the capabilities that we as IEEE CIS had on our own. As long as it is adopted by multiple authors, the tools that we use to produce such articles will definitely change in the future. And this could be a community guided process, but IEEE CIS may also be interested to guide this process themselves by providing tools in the future. But it's all depending on how well it is adopted by the community and how much value it actually produces. So for now, using tools like Visual Studio Code, for example, allows us to develop our own extensions, which makes it easier to handle the template. But UI-based approach might emerge in the future, as we have seen for Overleaf, which is basically mixing a rich text format with the LaTeX format that we are using to actually produce the paper, such that we have a mixed representation of things. So what you see is what you get editor may be coming in the future.
Right, thank you. So then from our side, I just once again would like to thank the speaker. So Alex, thank you for the webinar and for explaining also this concept and for answering all of those questions. And also for the audience, thank you for attending and also for being such a great audience of all of the questions that you have asked. We hope that you have enjoyed the webinar and that you have found it very insightful. If you do have any further questions, please reach out to Alex, also with regards to the special issue. And with that, I would like to wish all of you a wonderful rest of the day. So thank you very much and enjoy the
Thank you
rest of
very
your
much
day.
for tuning in.
Bye.
Bye.